In the darkest days of World War II, when bomb sirens shattered nights and hope seemed to flicker like a dying candle, there was one woman whose courage became a lifeline for hundreds. Clara Hughes, a young Red Cross volunteer from Ohio, stepped into the chaos when most people fled, determined not only to survive, but to save lives. This is the story of how one woman's bravery echoed across battlefields, hospitals, and bombed-out streets, leaving a mark that would never be forgotten. Clara was barely 22 when the war escalated. Unlike most women of her age, who were encouraged to stay home or work in factories, she felt a calling she could not ignore. The letters from soldiers on the front lines, the desperate pleas from families torn apart, reached her every morning. Each envelope, each cry for help strengthened her resolve. She joined the Red Cross not as a formality, not as a resume booster, but as a promise to herself. She would stand where others could not. Her first assignment took her to a hospital in London, a city under constant air raids. The streets were littered with rubble, the air thick with smoke, and yet Clara moved with purpose. She carried supplies, comforted the wounded, and recorded every detail of the injured soldiers' needs. Doctors relied on her efficiency, nurses admired her tenacity, and soldiers, many barely older than her, found solace in her unwavering presence. Every life she touched became a story of hope in a world that seemed determined to snuff it out. But Clara's bravery extended beyond hospital walls. During one night raid, an ambulance convoy was trapped in the ruins of a bombed neighborhood. Without hesitation, Clara sprinted across open streets, dodging debris and falling masonry, to deliver medicine to soldiers pinned down by chaos. Witnesses later described her as almost ethereal, moving with a purpose that seemed to defy fear itself. In that single night, she saved more than 20 lives. Many of them young men who would later recount her heroism in letters that would eventually reach her home. Her letters home never bragged of her deeds. Instead, she wrote of the people she met, of the pain she wished she could erase, and of the small victories that kept her going. "It's not about me," she would say in her humble tone. "It's about keeping hope alive where it's needed most." Yet, her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. Families on both sides of the Atlantic learned of Clara Hughes through whispered stories in hospitals, letters, and community bulletins. She became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that courage could wear a nurse's uniform and carry a first aid kit instead of a weapon. Every day in London, every convoy through bombed-out towns, every life she touched added layers to Clara's legacy. And while the war raged on, she quietly trained others, teaching new Red Cross volunteers how to handle trauma, how to stay calm when everything around them fell apart, and how to find strength in the smallest gestures, a hand held, a reassuring word, a simple smile. Her influence multiplied, and soon dozens of volunteers carried her lessons into the field, spreading the quiet heroism that would define her career. As the first part of her story closes, one thing becomes clear. Clara Hughes was more than a volunteer. She was a force of nature, a beacon in a world shadowed by destruction. And the journey of this remarkable woman was only just beginning. In the next chapter, we'll see how her bravery would stretch further than she ever imagined, crossing oceans and front lines, leaving an indelible mark on the history of the Red Cross and the lives she touched. Clara Hughes had learned quickly that courage wasn't just about facing bombs and bullets. It was about facing despair, day after day, and refusing to let it win. London's hospitals were overflowing. The air was thick with smoke and fear, and yet she pressed on, driven by a quiet conviction that even one life saved was worth the risk. By 1942, Clara's reputation had grown among both soldiers and fellow volunteers. She was no longer just a face in the hospital corridors. She was a lifeline. Her days began before sunrise, moving from ward to ward, distributing bandages, medicine, and, most importantly, hope. Soldiers who had lost limbs, who had witnessed their friends fall, found solace in her calm presence. She listened to their stories without judgment, offered a steady hand during surgeries, and sometimes, in the middle of the chaos, sang softly to soothe the fear. One particularly brutal winter, when air raids struck relentlessly and resources were scarce, Clara organized a small team to deliver care packages directly to the front lines. She knew the soldiers were cold, exhausted, and running low on essentials. The night she led that convoy, the streets were a battlefield of rubble and fire. But Clara refused to wait for safety. She insisted that someone had to be brave, that someone had to bring warmth and reassurance to those in need. By the time the mission was complete, dozens of soldiers had received food, medicine, and letters from home, and many would later credit that night with saving their will to fight another day. Her bravery wasn't limited to physical danger. Clara faced emotional trauma daily. The war left no corner untouched. She witnessed young men shattered by the horrors of combat, families torn apart, and civilians caught in the crossfire. Yet, she carried the weight of their stories without breaking. She developed a method of coping that combined efficiency with empathy, meticulous care for every patient, paired with a listening ear. The soldiers began to trust her not only as a nurse, but as a confidant. Letters sent home often mentioned her name, praising the comfort she brought during the worst moments of their lives. Clara's influence reached far beyond London. In 1943, she was reassigned to France after the D-Day invasions. There, she faced challenges unlike anything she had seen. The hospitals were makeshift, located in barns, schools, and even bombed-out factories. Supplies were limited, but Clara's resourcefulness knew no bounds. She taught local volunteers how to improvise medical equipment, how to ration medicine efficiently, and how to keep morale alive in the face of overwhelming odds. Her leadership inspired those around her to rise above fear, turning ordinary volunteers into pillars of strength. It was during this period that Clara's quiet heroism became legendary. Soldiers began calling her the Angel in Uniform, a moniker that she never sought but quietly cherished. She wrote letters to families, informing them of their loved ones' conditions, offering hope where there had been none. Her ability to maintain humanity amidst devastation became her trademark. Even the enemy occasionally acknowledged her courage, impressed by the selfless dedication she showed on both sides of the conflict. Yet, Clara never allowed fame to distract her from her mission. She worked tirelessly, often skipping meals or sleep, motivated by a simple principle: every person mattered. Her courage inspired a generation of women who joined the Red Cross, learning from her example that heroism didn't always come with medals. It came with heart, resilience, and unwavering commitment. By 1942, Clara Hughes not just as a volunteer, but as a symbol of hope in a war-torn world. She had faced fear, despair, and unimaginable challenges, yet she remained steadfast. Her journey was far from over, and the next chapters would test her resolve in ways she could never have imagined, stretching her courage and compassion to the limits. The war in France was brutal, the kind of brutality that tested the limits of human endurance. Yet, amidst the chaos and despair, Clara Hughes moved with unwavering determination. Every bombed street, every screaming siren, every shattered life became a call to action she could not ignore. And for the soldiers and civilians she touched, Clara was more than a volunteer. She was hope personified. Arriving in Normandy shortly after the D-Day landings, Clara was immediately confronted with the scale of the devastation. Hospitals were overflowing with wounded soldiers, many missing limbs or suffering severe trauma. She walked among them, assessing needs, calming fears, and offering a steady hand in the midst of panic. Her presence became a constant reassurance. Soldiers who had seen death up close found a rare comfort in her tireless devotion. One night, during a sudden artillery barrage, Clara was assisting a makeshift surgical team when a shell hit nearby, shaking the building and sending dust and debris flying. While others ducked for cover, she remained focused on the wounded soldier before her, guiding nurses through a complex procedure with calm precision. Later, that soldier would recall her voice, steady and confident amid chaos, as the thing that kept him alive. Moments like these defined Clara. Her courage wasn't just physical, it was a mental and emotional anchor for everyone around her. Clara also faced moral dilemmas that weighed heavily on her. She encountered soldiers from both sides, civilians caught in crossfire, and local families suffering unimaginable losses. She treated them all with the same compassion and dedication, adhering to the Red Cross principles of neutrality and humanity. Letters she wrote home often reflected the inner turmoil she felt, yet she never wavered in her mission. Even in the worst of times, she wrote, "We must be the light others cling to, no matter how faint it seems." Her leadership quickly became evident. She organized small units of Red Cross volunteers to distribute supplies, set up field hospitals, and provide emergency care. Her meticulous planning ensured that even in the most chaotic situations, help reached those who needed it most. Many volunteers credited her guidance for saving not only lives, but also the morale of entire communities. Clara's influence stretched far beyond her immediate actions. She created systems of care that would continue long after she had moved on. There were nights when Clara lay awake, haunted by the faces of those she could not save. Yet, even in her darkest moments, she found strength in the lives she did touch. Every soldier who survived, every civilian comforted, every volunteer inspired became a testament to her resilience. She understood that heroism wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, compassion, and the relentless refusal to let despair win. Clara's work in France also marked a turning point in her career. She began documenting medical procedures, organizing training sessions, and mentoring new volunteers. Her approach combined skill with empathy, teaching others how to remain composed in life-or-death situations while maintaining humanity in the face of horror. Through her guidance, countless Red Cross volunteers became capable of handling crises they never imagined facing, carrying Clara's lessons forward into the war and beyond. By the end of Part 3, it's clear that Clara Hughes was more than a volunteer. She was a force of hope in a world overwhelmed by darkness. Her courage, compassion, and tireless dedication were already leaving a lasting mark, shaping the lives of soldiers, civilians, and fellow volunteers alike. And as the war continued, her story would reach even greater heights, proving that one determined woman could change the course of countless lives even in the midst of unimaginable conflict. Clara Hughes soon realized that courage alone wasn't enough to face the horrors of war. Compassion, quick thinking, and unwavering determination were equally vital. France was scarred by bombed-out villages, shattered families, and wounded soldiers whose pain was both visible and invisible. And yet, in the midst of this devastation, Clara became a constant presence, a lifeline that many clung to when all else seemed lost. By 1944, Clara had earned a reputation not just for her bravery, but for her remarkable ability to connect with those in suffering. Soldiers didn't just remember her skill, they remembered her voice, calm and soothing amid chaos, her hands steady when all else was trembling, and the way she made them feel seen and valued even when the world around them seemed intent on destruction. She became a symbol of humanity on a battlefield that had forgotten it. One winter morning, Clara received word of a village caught in the crossfire. Civilians were trapped without medical care, food, or heat. Without hesitation, she organized a small team and ventured into the snow-laden streets. Gunfire echoed around them, but Clara led her team forward, refusing to leave anyone behind. Hours later, after delivering essential supplies and tending to the wounded, she returned with stories of survival and gratitude. Many of the villagers would later say that she saved not just lives, but the very hope that had kept them going through months of fear and isolation. Her compassion extended to the soldiers she treated as well. Clara understood that many men carried emotional wounds alongside physical ones. She listened to their fears, offered comfort, and sometimes even shared stories of home to remind them that life outside the war still existed. Soldiers confided in her, sometimes for the first time since deployment, trusting her with their deepest anxieties. Her presence was a quiet reminder that even amidst destruction, humanity could endure. Clara also faced moments of profound personal danger. During a particularly fierce bombing raid, she navigated a collapsing building to rescue a young soldier pinned under rubble. Dust filled the air, flames licked nearby walls, and every instinct screamed to retreat, but Clara refused. Her hands worked tirelessly to free him, and when she finally succeeded, the soldier's eyes reflected not only relief, but awe at her courage. That night, she returned to her temporary quarters exhausted, but her resolve only strengthened. She understood that saving lives sometimes demanded risking her own, and she did so without hesitation. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Fellow Red Cross volunteers looked to Clara for guidance, inspired by her fearlessness and compassion. She began mentoring them, sharing strategies to manage trauma, organize supplies, and maintain morale even in the most desperate situations. Her influence spread, multiplying her impact far beyond the individuals she could personally touch. Volunteers trained under Clara would go on to save countless lives, carrying forward her legacy of resilience and empathy. By the end of Part 4, Clara Hughes had become more than a caregiver. She had become a symbol of unyielding courage and compassion. Every life saved, every soldier comforted, every volunteer inspired added to the growing legend of a woman's quiet determination lit the darkest corners of a war-torn world. And yet, even as her impact expanded, the war continued to test her in ways she could never have imagined, setting the stage for challenges that would push her to the absolute limits of endurance, skill, and heart. By mid-1944, Clara Hughes had become more than a Red Cross volunteer. She was a symbol of resilience, a beacon for soldiers and civilians alike. Yet the war was relentless, and each day brought new horrors to confront. Every bombed-out street, every hospital overflowing with the injured, reminded her that courage wasn't optional, it was essential. During the summer campaigns in northern France, Clara faced some of the most grueling challenges of her life. Soldiers returned from the front lines exhausted, wounded, and often broken in spirit. Clara moved through the chaos with unwavering determination, triaging the most critical cases, performing basic surgeries when doctors were overwhelmed, and offering comfort when words seemed meaningless. Her presence alone became a stabilizing force, a reminder to the soldiers that someone cared deeply for their survival. One afternoon, a convoy transporting wounded soldiers was caught in crossfire near a small village. Clara, seeing the danger, insisted on accompanying the medics to provide immediate care. Bullets flew, explosions rocked the streets, yet she pressed forward, calmly guiding medics to prioritize those most in need. By the end of the mission, every soldier in the convoy had received critical treatment. Lives were saved that day because Clara refused to yield to fear. Clara also understood the psychological toll of war. Many soldiers suffered not just from injuries, but from trauma that haunted their every step. She took the time to listen to their stories, to write letters home when they could not, and to ensure that even the smallest gestures, like a warm cup of soup or a reassuring touch, provided a glimmer of hope. Her empathy transformed fear into resilience, despair into determination, one life at a time. Beyond the battlefield, Clara worked tirelessly to improve conditions for her fellow volunteers. She organized supply chains, trained newcomers in first aid, and established protocols for emergency care that allowed her teams to operate efficiently under extreme pressure. Her ability to blend strategic thinking with heartfelt compassion made her indispensable, and those around her grew to admire her not just for her courage, but for her leadership. Despite the relentless pace, Clara never allowed herself to lose sight of the human stories behind the statistics. Every soldier she treated, every civilian she aided, was more than a number. They were sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers. She celebrated small victories, like a soldier taking his first step after an amputation, or a child's smile returning after days of fear. These moments, though fleeting, fueled her drive to continue. By the close of Part 5, Clara Hughes had become a living testament to the power of dedication and humanity in a world engulfed by destruction. Her courage, resourcefulness, and unwavering empathy were saving lives in ways that statistics alone could never capture. Yet, even as her legend grew, the war's trials were far from over, and Clara would soon face challenges that demanded every ounce of her skill, heart, and resolve. The deeper Clara Hughes delved into the heart of war-torn France, the more she realized that heroism wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about facing unimaginable horrors and refusing to turn away. Every street, every hospital, every battlefield presented a new test of courage, and Clara, with unwavering determination, rose to meet them all. By late 1944, the scale of devastation in France had become staggering. Villages lay in ruins, families were displaced, and soldiers returned from battlefields with injuries both visible and invisible. Clara navigated this chaos with precision and compassion, tending to the wounded while offering comfort to those who had lost everything. Her presence was a quiet anchor, giving hope to those who had begun to believe that all light had vanished. One particularly harrowing night, Clara led a group of volunteers to evacuate civilians trapped in a bombed-out town. Shells exploded nearby, fires raged, and the streets were littered with debris. Yet Clara moved fearlessly, coordinating her team, directing civilians to safety, and tending to the injured along the way. Hours later, everyone had been brought to safety thanks to her leadership and unshakable courage. For those who survived, Clara Hughes was no longer just a volunteer, she was a lifeline. Clara's work also brought her face to face with the emotional toll of war. Many soldiers returned from the front lines carrying invisible wounds, trauma, fear, and guilt. She listened patiently, wrote letters home for those too exhausted to write themselves, and provided comfort with small human gestures, a touch on the shoulder, a reassuring smile, or simply sitting beside someone who couldn't sleep. Her empathy created a ripple effect, turning fear into resilience and despair into determination. Her efforts extended beyond immediate care. Clara trained new volunteers, teaching them not only medical procedures, but also how to maintain calm under pressure and how to treat every individual with dignity. She created systems for emergency response, organized supply lines, and ensured that every team she led could operate efficiently even under the most extreme conditions. Volunteers who worked with her often said that Clara's quiet strength and leadership inspired them to do more than they thought possible. Yet, Clara faced moments that tested her to the absolute limit. During a supply run to a forward field hospital, she and her team were caught in a sudden artillery attack. Most would have frozen, but Clara's instincts took over. She guided her team, ensured the wounded were prioritized, and even managed to treat a soldier whose injuries were severe. That night, Clara not only saved lives, but demonstrated the kind of bravery that would be remembered for decades. By the end of Part 6, it was evident that Clara Hughes had become far more than a Red Cross volunteer. She was a symbol of hope, a beacon of courage, and a testament to the power of compassion in a world ravaged by conflict. Each life she saved, each soldier she comforted, and each volunteer she inspired added to the growing legacy of a woman who refused to let despair win. And as the war continued, Clara's journey was poised to reach even greater heights, testing her resolve, skill, and heart in ways she had never imagined. By 1945, the war in Europe had reached its most critical stages, and Clara Hughes found herself at the center of both danger and hope. Bombed-out villages, shattered hospitals, and exhausted soldiers were her daily reality. But Clara had become a force of resilience, undaunted, unwavering, and determined to save every life she could. One bitterly cold morning, Clara was dispatched to a forward field hospital near the front lines. The building had been partially destroyed by shelling, and supplies were dangerously low. Soldiers arriving were severely injured, many with wounds that required immediate attention. Clara coordinated her team with precision, improvising medical techniques when standard equipment was unavailable, ensuring that no life was left unattended. Her quick thinking and courage under fire saved countless soldiers who otherwise might have perished. During one particularly harrowing incident, a convoy of injured soldiers was trapped under constant artillery fire. Clara insisted on accompanying the medics to administer critical care on site, despite the extreme risk. She moved fearlessly between the injured, calming the panicked, applying bandages, and even performing basic procedures herself when doctors were overwhelmed. That night, more than 20 soldiers survived because of her bravery, a feat that would later be recounted in letters and memoirs by those whose lives she had touched. Clara's compassion extended beyond soldiers to civilians caught in the crossfire. She treated children injured during bombing raids, comforted families who had lost homes, and helped organize temporary shelters for displaced communities. Her efforts often meant walking through dangerous streets under the cover of darkness, carrying medicine, food, and supplies to those who needed them most. Every step was a risk, yet Clara moved as if guided by a purpose far greater than herself. Her influence on fellow volunteers was profound. She trained new recruits in emergency response, trauma care, and crisis management, teaching them not only medical skills, but also the importance of calm and empathy in life or death situations. Volunteers under her guidance often remarked that Clara's leadership inspired them to surpass their own limits, instilling in them a resilience that would last long after the war ended. Amidst the chaos, Clara remained human. She experienced fear, exhaustion, and heartbreak, but never despair. Every life saved, every child comforted, every soldier reassured, reinforced her belief that even in the darkest times, one person's courage could make an extraordinary difference. Letters she wrote home captured this quiet determination, though she rarely spoke of her own heroics. To Clara, the true reward was seeing someone survive, smile, or regain hope in the midst of despair. By the end of Part 7, Clara Hughes had cemented her legacy as more than a volunteer. She was a beacon of hope in a war-torn world. Her actions resonated far beyond the front lines, inspiring soldiers, civilians, and fellow Red Cross volunteers alike. And yet, even as victory approached, Clara's greatest tests were still ahead, demanding all her skill, bravery, and unyielding compassion to save lives in the war's final, most desperate moments. As 1945 dawned, the war in Europe was nearing its end, but for Clara Hughes, the danger had not diminished. Cities lay in ruins. Soldiers limped from battlefield to battlefield, and civilians struggled to survive in shattered communities. Yet amidst this chaos, Clara remained an unwavering force, determined to save every life she could reach. Clara was dispatched to a war-torn region where hospitals were overwhelmed and resources nearly depleted. The wounded arrived faster than they could be treated, and the conditions were desperate. Clara moved through the chaos with calm precision, directing volunteers, administering care, and offering comfort. Her tireless dedication became a beacon for soldiers and civilians alike, reminding them that humanity still endured even in the darkest times. One unforgettable night, a bombing raid left dozens trapped under debris in a partially destroyed building. Clara refused to wait for reinforcements. She grabbed her medical kit and ran into the rubble, guiding her team as they worked tirelessly to rescue survivors. Flames, smoke, and falling masonry surrounded them, but Clara's focus never wavered. By dawn, all trapped individuals had been freed, many of them alive because of her courage. Soldiers and civilians alike would later recount that night as miraculous, attributing their survival to Clara's fearless leadership. Her compassion extended beyond immediate survival. She treated soldiers suffering from both physical and emotional wounds, often taking time to listen to their stories, write letters home, or provide small comforts, a warm cup of tea, a reassuring word, a gentle touch. In every act, Clara conveyed a simple message. Even amidst destruction, hope and humanity could endure. Clara also trained new volunteers under extreme conditions. She taught them how to navigate bombed-out cities, triage under pressure, and care for both physical and emotional trauma. Her methods were practical, efficient, and imbued with empathy, ensuring that each new volunteer could replicate her approach and save lives even when she wasn't present. Her influence spread exponentially, touching more lives than she could ever meet personally. Amid all this, Clara faced moments that tested her resolve like never before. During a supply run to an isolated village, she and her team were caught in crossfire. Soldiers were injured, civilians were frightened, and chaos surrounded them. Clara moved swiftly, prioritizing care, directing evacuation, and offering comfort, all while under the threat of artillery fire. Her calm presence turned fear into action, and every life she touched that day was a testament to her courage and dedication. By the end of Part 8, Clara Hughes had become a living legend, not for medals or recognition, but for her unwavering humanity in the face of relentless war. Her heroism had saved hundreds, inspired countless volunteers, and given hope to soldiers and civilians alike. And as victory in Europe loomed, Clara's journey was far from over. Even in the war's final days, she would confront challenges that demanded every ounce of her courage, skill, and heart. The final months of the war brought chaos, desperation, and unimaginable challenges. But Clara Hughes met them with the same unwavering courage that had defined her from the very beginning. Cities lay in ruins, hospitals overflowed, and the wounded poured in from every battlefield. Yet in this storm of destruction, Clara remained a constant, a lifeline for those who had lost everything. Clara was sent to the front lines where fighting still raged. Soldiers arrived with severe injuries, many having endured days without medical attention. Clara moved tirelessly among them, assessing wounds, performing basic procedures, and calming those in shock. Her presence instilled hope and strength, reminding everyone that even in the war's darkest hours, compassion and humanity could prevail. One fateful night, Clara faced a situation that would test her courage like never before. A convoy carrying wounded soldiers was trapped in a village under artillery fire. While most would have waited for reinforcements, Clara led her team into the chaos. Bullets whizzed past, explosions shook the ground, and rubble threatened to collapse around them. But Clara's focus never wavered. She coordinated the evacuation, treated the critically injured on site, and ensured every life she could reach was saved. That night, dozens survived because of her fearless leadership. Her efforts weren't limited to soldiers alone. Clara tended to civilians displaced by the fighting, children who had lost their homes, families separated by bombings, and the elderly struggling to survive. She organized emergency shelters, distributed food and medicine, and offered emotional support. Every action, no matter how small, reinforced her belief that hope could endure even amidst utter devastation. Clara's mentorship of new volunteers also intensified during this period. She trained them in rapid response, emergency care, and crisis management under extreme conditions. Volunteers, inspired by her example, took on responsibilities they never imagined, multiplying her impact exponentially. Clara's quiet guidance ensured that her methods, courage, and empathy would continue to save lives long after she moved on from each mission. Amid the relentless pace, Clara faced moments of personal exhaustion and doubt. She had witnessed horrors no one should see, yet she pressed on, driven by an unwavering commitment to humanity. Her letters home rarely mentioned her heroics. She wrote instead about the people she helped, the lives she touched, and the hope she clung to. And yet, those who worked with her recognized a rare and extraordinary courage, a woman who refused to let fear dictate her actions, no matter the cost. By the end of Part 9, Clara Hughes had become more than a Red Cross volunteer. She was a symbol of courage, compassion, and unwavering resilience. Her legacy had already touched hundreds of lives, inspired countless volunteers, and given hope to soldiers and civilians alike. And now, as victory approached, Clara's story would reach its final, most defining chapter, where her skill, bravery, and heart would shine brighter than ever before. Victory in Europe was on the horizon. But for Clara Hughes, the final days of the war brought challenges unlike any she had faced before. Hospitals overflowed, soldiers staggered from the front lines, and civilians, weary and broken, relied on her courage more than ever. Yet Clara, undeterred by exhaustion or fear, continued her mission, her compassion and bravery shining brighter than ever. In the spring of 1945, Clara was stationed near a city still under siege. The wounded poured in relentlessly, many having endured days without care. Clara coordinated teams, administered aid, and comforted the terrified, all while navigating buildings damaged by bombings and streets littered with debris. Her calm presence and unwavering dedication became a lifeline in a world teetering on the edge of despair. One unforgettable day, Clara faced an unimaginable crisis. A makeshift hospital had been hit by artillery, leaving dozens trapped under rubble and many injured. Without hesitation, Clara led her team into the wreckage. Dust, smoke, and flames filled the air, yet she moved with precision and courage, prioritizing care, rescuing the wounded, and ensuring that no life was left behind. By the end of that harrowing day, many lives had been saved, lives that would later recount Clara Hughes' heroism as nothing short of miraculous. Clara also tended to those invisible wounds, soldiers traumatized by combat, children scarred by loss, and families torn apart by war. She offered listening ears, words of comfort, and small gestures of humanity, a warm meal, a reassuring hand, a smile amidst devastation. In every interaction, Clara reinforced a powerful truth. Even in the darkest moments, hope could survive if someone dared to protect it. Her mentorship of Red Cross volunteers reached its peak. Clara trained them in high-pressure emergency response, trauma care, and crisis leadership, ensuring that her methods and values would continue to save lives long after she had moved on. Volunteers inspired by her courage carried forward her legacy, multiplying her impact exponentially across the war-torn landscapes of Europe. As Germany surrendered and victory became a reality, Clara reflected on her journey. Hundreds of lives had been saved, countless soldiers had found comfort, and volunteers had learned the meaning of courage and empathy from her example. Yet Clara remained humble, insisting that her work was never about recognition. It was about preserving humanity, one life at a time. By the end of her story, Clara Hughes had transformed from a young volunteer into a legend of courage, compassion, and resilience. Her actions had left an indelible mark on the soldiers she saved, the civilians she comforted, and the volunteers she inspired. She had proven that one determined woman, armed not with weapons, but with empathy, courage, and unwavering dedication, could change the course of hundreds of lives, even amidst the unimaginable horrors of war. Clara Hughes's legacy endures, a testament to the power of humanity, bravery, and hope in the face of darkness. And long after the last bombs fell and the war ended, the stories of her heroism continue to inspire generations, reminding the world that true courage often wears no uniform, yet leaves a mark that can never be forgotten.